Hello, dear guests, distinguished diplomats, civic activists, friends of democracy and transparency. I am very pleased to see you all here, attending our first Voices of Russia talks this year. And in fact, the topic that's going to be tackled today will be the first one of its kind for us. We try to make our way to the complex world of energy security, politics, economy, and environmental issues. The Nord Stream 2 project we'll discuss upon combine these three pillars at an enormous scale. Energy resources aren't just commodity, but a handy tool for Kremlin's political ambitions. It's a true power struggle in a whole geopolitical context. Dear guests, I will briefly introduce our speakers today here. First of all, welcome Mikhail Korchemkin, the founder and managing director of East European Gas Analysis. This is a consulting company that specializes in cost-benefit and financial analysis of natural gas projects in Eastern Europe and former Soviet Union. Mikhail has consulted numerous corporate and governmental clients, including British Petroleum, British Gas, Ernst & Young, Neste, Ruhrgas, Shell, Statoil, the World Bank, to name a few. He has also taught at University of Pennsylvania and held visiting scholarships at Harvard University and Erasmus University in Rotterdam. We are very happy to have you here. Your expertise here. Welcome back to Tallinn. Tere tulemast. Mikhail's presentation will be followed by a panel discussion, but before the panel, we'll hear about the environmental risks of Nord Stream 2 by Yevgenia Chirikova. Yevgenia is a well-known Russian environmentalist and civic activist who has been carrying out her work from Estonia for the past few years. She's also running a web portal called Aktivatika.org that allows Russians to crowdsource information about environmental and human rights issues. At the discussion panel, Erik Niles Kross will contribute to the debate with his expertise and as the former intelligence chief and currently member of the Estonian Parliament. The discussion will be moderated by Hans Hašluik, media entrepreneur, founder of Express Group. Hans will have an excellent and good chance of rediscovering his inner investigative journalist again. Thank you so much for being with us today. Our event today will be live streamed by Estonian Public Broadcasting Portal. I wish all the people here in this room and behind the screens a very interesting event today, very interesting next 2 hours. And now I would like to invite Mikhail Korchemkin to the floor. Enjoy.
Thank you, Mo. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to speak in Tallinn. I haven't done it for I don't know how many years, maybe 30 or more. Today I'll try to summarize some pros, if any, and a lot of contrasts of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project. I'll start with the facts about gas-to-gas competition in the destination point of the pipeline, Germany. It's a not well-known fact that the current capacity of gas pipelines capable to deliver Russian gas to the German border is 133 billion cubic meters a year. And Nord Stream 2 plans to raise this number to 188. On many occasions, I've heard that Vladimir Putin and some European politicians say that the project is about giving unfair advantages to American LNG versus Russian gas. But Germany doesn't have a single LNG terminal, so the current game is 133 billion cubic meters versus 0. And it's definitely not about the competition. The overall capacity of all LNG terminals in continental Europe, from the Atlantic coast of France to Lithuania, is just 61 billion cubic meters. So in fact, this project is more about moving gas transit business from Slovakia to Germany. And it's definitely not diversification, but very clear concentration. Despite Russia's promises that Nord Stream 2 would increase the security of supply, the recent history shows that it's not correct. Back in the winter of 2014 and 2015, Gazprom has already used gas tap to reduce gas flow to Europe through Ukraine and the Nord Stream pipeline. The matter was Vladimir Putin didn't like the reverse sales of gas from Europe to Ukraine, and he threatened European companies that he would reduce the gas flow and fulfill his threat in the winter. So the flow was down from January to March of 2015, and overall shareholders of Gazprom lost the revenue of about $4 billion. The reverse flow didn't stop. It was just purely punishment of Russian budget and the shareholders of Gazprom. With Nord Stream 2 in place, the overall flow of Russian gas to Europe will be dangerously dependent on bilateral relations of Moscow and Berlin. Actually, it's right now the flow is quite diversified. It's part of the flow goes through the Baltic Sea by Nord Stream, another part through Poland, and the rest goes through Ukraine and further on through Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania. If there are problems between Kremlins, for instance, and Hungary or Slovakia, it wouldn't affect the flow through other parts of the European Union. But we have seen on many occasions, like this one, and for instance, the periods of bad and good relations with Turkey, that the situation can change any time and drastically. And so the security of supply is provided not by additional pipeline, but good behavior, and the definition of good and bad is given by the Kremlin. I don't have no doubt that Russia would use the TAP again, because TAP works better than arbitration. In the market, it's very important to know that consumers like to receive gas when they need it. Specifically, they use more gas in winter for obvious reasons, and on weekdays rather than in weekends, because many plants and businesses are closed on weekends and they don't use electricity, so less electricity is generated on weekends. So the 2-year chart shows it has basically 52 by 2, 104 drops plus holidays. The drops are weekends and holidays, and the peaks are the period of cold, and very important recent achievement, it's a period of low wind, because wind turbines provide much more electricity in Germany than gas power plants, but when the wind is down, gas and coal come to help and generate more power. So the market needs flexibility. It's just one example of required flexibility. And the gas infrastructure should be able to provide short-term swings corresponding to the demand. On top of the renewable energy, the market experiences decline in gas production in Holland. So if we look at the curve of production, it goes down year by year, and which is very important. They supply less gas in winter. Plus, there is a closure of very important, the biggest storage facility in the United Kingdom that used to provide gas in winter time. So the European Union and the UK need to find gas on winter day from elsewhere, and this difference is growing. So the current supply of gas to Slovakia and Czech Republic is as follows. The OPAL pipelines that brings gas from the outlet of Nord Stream across Germany from north to south of Germany to the border of Czech Republic, it's basically flat with very minor fluctuations. On the other hand, the Ukrainian pipeline system provides flexible flow in accordance with the change of demand. And this point here is just an accident in Baumgarten in December when the pipe exploded, but it took only 24 hours to fix the problem, which is a good advantage of onshore pipelines. If something goes wrong with the submarine pipeline, it will take several months to repair it. If we compare it, this gas delivered to Slovakia goes across Slovakia and feeds the Trans-Austria gas pipeline, which sends gas according to the changes of demand. And basically it correlates with the flow of Ukrainian supplies and not the flat line of supplies by Nord Stream. And Nord Stream itself ships gas irrespectively of the demand. So this is stability, I mean, equal volumes day after day through the year, and this is more valuable supply because it allows European consumers to save money on storage, on gas storage. So both Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 are designed to ship roughly equally volumes through the year. And if we look at the map of gas supply, if everything is, if Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 deliver gas to Greifswald, which is the Baltic coast of Germany, we can see there is a growing demand for peak load gas in winter months because of the restrictions in Holland and shortage of storage facility and in the UK. So this means that consumers in Europe, in the European Union, have to carry additional costs to store gas somewhere. Yeah, it's a very important point. We just experienced, this is the current cold snap, when temperatures in Europe went down. We can see the Nord Stream and OPAL, they're unable to help anything, but all the additional supply of gas from Russia came through Ukraine. The Ukrainian system responded to the change of demand and not the Nord Stream. And I also have to mention that Gazprom has already announced plans to decommission the pipelines that deliver gas to the Ukrainian border. It can be found at the website of Gazprom. It was both at shareholders meeting and at one official presentations of head of Gazprom, Alexey Miller. So, in case of shortage of gas in winter, which is or can be rather created by Nord Stream 2, the consumers would look at additional supplies and specifically the spot market. And the spot market also reacts on change of temperature, so the consumers would need to buy, like this time, the price of gas in the spot market went up 3 times. It was just for 1 day, but still it's when you need gas. If the period of higher prices, significantly higher, lasted for longer, it's like about a week, which is substantial. Consumers would lose a lot of money. And this is with the help of additional gas supplied by Ukraine. Without it, it would have been much longer period and higher price. So, second option is to store gas in summer and use it in winter. But this costs money. The average cost is roughly like between $80 and $90 per 1,000 cubic meters. So the overall consumer price would go up by about 1/3. So the availability of cheap Russian gas delivered by Nord Stream is not quite correct. It's more like a myth. On top of that, the storage expansion is limited by geological conditions. It cannot be done anywhere. It should be a very specific place. And plus, it costs a lot of money because you have to inject a lot of gas that will stay there forever. And very important, the price spikes would stimulate the use of coal. So the less gas you have, the more hot coal would be burned for power generation. Like, for instance, a good example of Germany. Hot coal is used exactly, and natural gas for peak load, to cover the peak load demand. And during the period of cold, this is this year, from January 1st to March 4th. Mostly it's used on 2 occasions, period of cold and low wind conditions. So this will be the case, even worse case in Central Europe. Very important thing, Nord Stream 2 puts a time frame or ends the transit business of Slovakia. And this runs counter the European Directive 2009/73 EC. It says that any new infrastructure must not be detrimental to competition, blah, 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 and to the efficient functioning of the regulated system to which the infrastructure is connected. And all this, the system is connected to the Opal pipeline enters somewhere here, and so it goes to the Czech Republic and into Slovakia, so it is connected to Slovakian gas pipelines. And so from the standpoint of the EC gas directive, it's not correct to kill one business for the sake of another business. The current existing businesses and operations should function efficiently. The system itself is last year shipped more than 53 billion cubic meters a year, and the capacity is above 90 billion cubic meters, so it can ship much more. Just 13, 14 years ago, Gazprom wanted to expand the capacity to like 110 billion cubic meters. That the statement is still available at the website of Gazprom. Now to Russia. The full cost of Nord Stream for Russians is even higher than for Europeans. Shareholders of Gazprom need to pay more than 40 billion euros into the project. Part of it is financed by the partners. Part of the submarine section over there, the 9 billion, is financed by European companies, but the Russian section, 31 billion, is taken from the profits of Gazprom. And by the accounting rules, which is normal, the cost of this additional infrastructure is mostly allocated to the domestic market. And as of now, the price of gas in Russia is regulated, so it justifies the increase of the price of gas for Russians. It reduces budget revenue, which is like not a big deal, and it doesn't leave any money to spend on construction of pipelines to deliver gas to coal-burning regions like Krasnoyarsk, for instance, and smaller places where people suffer from pollution caused by coal-burning power plants and just the coal burning. On top of that, it destroys nature reserve in the starting point at the Baltic shore of Leningrad province. Now the summary for European Union. The positive points are, in general, any additional pipeline increases technical security of supply. But not in this case, because this project is combined with the decommissioning of pipelines that currently run through Ukraine. So if it was just an additional pipeline like Nord Stream 1, the situation would have been different. The second positive point is that German operators will be paid irrespective of gas flow. Even if the pipe is empty, they would be paid for, because the capacity would be booked through indefinite period of time. But this looks good from the German point of view, and if you changed it for view, look at the problem from Slovakia, you would think different about it. The cons are longer, and just some of them. So it makes the Russian supplies dangerously dependent on relations between Moscow and Berlin. Then, very important technical problem that it reduces the flexibility of supply and creates a shortage of gas supplies in wintertime. It increases cost of gas for European consumers because they would need to pay. Gazprom would transfer the problems of regulating the seasonal and shorter-term fluctuation of demand. This burden would be put on the shoulders of European consumers. Same thing, it would, because the gas would be more expensive, it would promote the use of coal for power generation. It runs counter the European Union policy of diversification of gas supply and energy supply because it concentrates the supplies in a single narrow corridor. And finally, the project kills gas transit business in Slovakia, which runs counter the Directive 2009/73. Every project has winners, and there are winners in Nord Stream 2 project too, and these are contractors of Gazprom, Mr. Rotenberg and Timchenko. They built all the pipelines inside Russia, and they managed to spend 2-3 times more per kilometer on pipeline than Germans and Czech constructors do on similar projects in Europe. So even if you look at the project, Gazprom publishes the numbers, the cost numbers for different areas, and even the projects in the south and in the plains of southern Russia, like the easiest area, friendly area for pipeline constructors, the cost is several times higher than in Germany and Czech Republic. So naturally, these two guys are looking forward to spend over 31 billion euros on linking the Yamal Peninsula with the Baltic Sea. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michal. We will not be taking questions right now. because the next to perform would be Evgenia Chirikova, a very well-known ecological activist from Khimki near Moscow. We're very happy to have Evgenia here. For how long time are you in Estonia already? You have your own mic.
Oh, okay. And Mikhail? Thank you. Да, конечно. Thank you a lot for organizers of this event. It's really a unique chance for me to share with you very important aspects of the Nord Stream 2 project. And I want to share with you ecological, environmental and climate change problems in the Nord Stream 2 project. You can see a map and you can see a trajectory of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and its pipeline come from Russia to Germany, from the bottom of Baltic Sea, and you can see a red sector. It's red sector on the Kurgalsky nature reserve, and it's really very important and a really unique territory for Russia. It's a territory of Kurgalsky National Park, and this pipeline destroy very important south part of Kurgalsky nature reserve. And maybe it will be interesting for my Estonian colleague to know that word Kurg, it's Finno-Ugric word, and it means crane, Kurg. Yes, and I think that traditionally it was a Finno-Ugric land. And was a problem with the Kurgalsky nature reserve. According to the project, big sector, 3.7 kilometers, wanted to destroy, wanted to cut down all trees in this territory. And of course, it will be a tragedy for Kurgalsky nature reserve. This will disturb the soil and violate the ecological system of the Kurgalsky nature reserve. The gas pipeline runs through the Kurgalsky nature reserve, which will lead to the destruction of rare species, birds, animals, and plants. And I show for you the species. First of them, it's really a very, very rare species, white-tailed eagle, and he in habitat in the Kurgalsky nature reserve. And my colleague from Greenpeace Russia, they make a special business trip to control of a situation in Kurgalsky nature reserve, and they find just in 100 meters from the plant pipeline nest of the species, and it's mean. It's really very near, and it's mean that the species is under threat of destruction in the Kurgalsky nature reserve if the project is implemented. And under the threat of destruction due to the Nord Stream 2 project are also other rare species, and I show for you them too. It's a northern seal and Baltic ringed seal. And it will be interesting for you to know that the northern seal is protected by the Convention of Migratory Species, signed by Germany. And I remind you that Germany is a main buyer of Russian gas. and it's interesting for me how it's possible in both time to sign a convention about protect this rare species and buy Russian gas and have a part in this strange project like Nord Stream 2. The Nord Stream 2 project also violates the two international conventions, and one of them is a Ramsar Convention, and another, the Convention of the Protection of the Marine Environment of the Baltic Sea. Nord Stream 2 violates not only international conventions, but the Russian legislation too. And during the 1 year, the company, the Nord Stream 2 AG company, held negotiations with the government of the Russia, Medvedev government, about the degradation of Russian legislation, because now we have in Russia very good legislation about protecting of our nature zone, our national parks, and now it's absolutely impossible to build some pipelines and make other activity in nature reserves like Kurgalsky, for example. This is why Nord Stream 2 AG has been lobbying for changes in Russian legislation. This is dangerous precedent because after the change of Russian legislation, not only Kurgalsky, but also other national parks and national reserves in all territory of Russia are under threat. Unfortunately, in Russia now, the Russian government, Russian authorities, has not interest in protecting nature. And unfortunately, now in Russia, we don't have any institution, including prosecutor, including police, who really protect nature. And Putin's regime is more interested in the income from the sale of gas. Recently in Russia, there have been a public hearing on this project, and Russian authorities made attempt to change territory of the Kurgalsky Nature Reserve and lower its ecological significance. The Nord Stream 2 project has not yet been formally launched, but my colleague from Greenpeace, environmentalist, when they organize a business trip with control of situation in Kurgalsky Nature Reserve, they find this heavy equipment on the territory of Kurgalsky Nature Reserve, and it's absolutely illegal because it's dangerous for this nature zone, and it means then Russian authorities, Russian side started to work without any permission in territory of Kurgalsky Nature Reserve, and it happens now. And you can see that it was in summer, and it means that its violations of Russian legislations started 1 year ago. And it is really very strange that Germany Minister of Economics and Energy, Sigmar Gabriel, said that Germany will support the Nord Stream 2 project only in the case of complaints with laws. It is interesting how Germany will participate in the Nord Stream 2 project, which violates both international conventions and Russian legislation. Another problem of the Nord Stream 2 project is a problem with climate change. And I remind you that Nord Stream 2 project is being after the Paris Climate Agreement, when it seems that all countries have recognized that danger of fossil fuels. However, here we have a project with aims to significantly increase gas supplies to Europe by 2030. The volume of gas sales to Europe has grown by 1.5 times since 2012. And it happens before realization of the Nord Stream 2 project. The main argument used by Nord Stream 2 AG company when it speaks of the safety of the project for the climate is that it will not be coal, but only natural gas, which is about half the risk for the climate. But in reality, the Russian authorities increase the gas supply to Europe and reduce the gas supply within Russia. At this moment, a third of Russia is not provided with gas at all. Look at this picture. Ordinary Russian people live like in 19th century without gas. And I think that it's absolutely shame for Russian authorities because they sell our gas, Russian gas, to Europe in situation when ordinary Russian people needed to live in this condition. The gasification program from Russians is being curtailed because there is not enough gas in Russia. It is sold to Europe. If Russia, instead of a climate-friendly gas, is beginning to use climate-dangerous coal more actively. Now coal mining in Russia is growing. A sort of large thermal power plants in Russia work on coal without normal modern filtering systems. The result of this active use of coal is environmental catastrophes. For example, effect of the black sky over Krasnoyarsk. About this effect speak Mikhail Korchomkin, and I show for you picture from Krasnoyarsk in these days. You can see that in these days, in Krasnoyarsk, it's impossible to breathe normally. And visibility really horrible, and smell in this day in Krasnoyarsk really very bad coal smell. And amazing that you with your family, with your children live in this town. It's absolutely impossible to protect members of your family. It is necessary to understand that when Europe buys gas from Putin, this provokes an increase in coal consumption in Russia, and this neutralizes the positive climate effect in Europe. Of course, for a normal solution to the climate issue, it is necessary to develop green energy and not gas projects like Nord Stream 2. And my last point, if we look at big picture, we understand then if Europe buys gas from Putin's Russia, its main, then Europe pays for aggressive military campaign of Putin's regime against Ukraine, against Syria, and Europe pays for Putin's propaganda machine, and Europe pays for secret new nuclear weapon of Putin's regime. And I think that the Nord Stream 2 project is really dangerous, not only for Russia, but for all the world.
Thank you very much. This was Yevgenia Chirikova. I remind you that Yevgenia was the brave initiator of a very powerful public movement against the destruction of part of Himki forest, which was being planned in the connection of a new road from Moscow to Petersburg. Now, I ask the panelists, Mikhail, Erik Niles, and Yevgenia, take the seats. And the way we are going to elaborate those topics is that we will have a panel lasting approximately 20 minutes, and then we would forward the word for questions to our distinguished audiences. Let me just continue from ecology. Why don't I? My first question goes to Yevgenia. As Mikhail Korchemkin rightly mentioned, liquefied gas is not so very close to Europe, not to talk about Germany, and it's not being produced in Europe because liquefied gas has achieved its very attractive price level thanks to a technology called fractioning, which has raised big protests in Poland and elsewhere in Europe, as a result of which we don't use this method of fractioning, of pouring high-pressure liquid into the terrain. The Yankees use it, Europeans don't. Is it ecological to buy liquefied gas from the Yankees, which has been fractioned? Это экологично купить такой газ?
I think that it's not so good decision because the result of fracking, it's really a destroy of soil and it's really destroy of nature in place of fracking. And its technology to polluted to underground rivers, and after that, consequences of this technology is really very, very bad for ecology. And I think that we have a very good example of clean and normal energy. And I want to share with you this example. It's example of Paldiski. It's windy farm. And I think that if you buy windy energy from Windify or from a solar panel or from biodiversity, it will be really very, very good decision because other fossil fuel, it's really dangerous technology.
Michael, please.
Yes, I'd like to add, actually, it's not only about the United States, everybody is slightly pregnant nowadays. So Gazprom uses hydrofracking even in West Siberia. So it's not 100% cracking produced gas, but some share of it. I think natural gas in general is, as Gazprom correctly observes in its official reports, is becoming a reserve or backup fuel for wind and solar, specifically for wind. Wind is unpredictable. When wind turbines stop moving, we need something to produce electricity in this short period of time. And gas is all right for the time being. Later on, when the world, country by country, develops batteries, accus for to conserve electricity, we will not need any backup fuel. It will be, the world will be completely green.
My intention further is now to divide my question in between the two periods, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. Before 2011 and 2012, two pipes were installed, one in 11, the other in 2012. There was a huge discussion Academy of Sciences of Estonian Republic made it clear that it's going to be almost an atom bomb beneath the sea. It was a very clear declaration, perhaps a little bit exaggerated. At the same time, what have been the results of Nord Stream 1? Evgenia, Eerik-Niiles, Mikhail, have we seen our ecological situation in the Baltic Sea deteriorating? Is it economically viable? Have we helped our German friends get gas which they need in this very cold winter of 2018 now? Has it been so good or so bad as it was expected? Eerik-Niiles, you haven't said a word yet.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very good view to compare the two projects, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. And we haven't really talked about the whole EU attitude towards this back then and now, which is quite different. So in a way, even if the EU is kind of failing to stop Nord Stream 2 today, Nord Stream 1 was barely even debated at the EU level. We debated it in Estonia because Russians, as you remember, asked for permission to do investigation or research in our borders, and famously the Estonian government denied them the permission. And from that moment, really, Estonia has kind of fallen out of the practical side of both projects. It went to Finland, became more expensive, and was built. But it was really built as a commercial project between Russia, Germany, and some European energy companies. Now, this time around, even if Estonia, for example, is not really directly involved, we have done quite a bit, particularly the previous governments, not this one that much, bringing the European Union into this debate. And even if, as of today, we know that the European Council of European Union legal opinion is that EU can't really debate this because it's a matter between Germany and Russia, even according to the view of the EU's own lawyers. So unfortunately, the EU is sort of falling on its back by its own legal difficulties. Nonetheless, there is a serious process going on in Brussels to try to slow it down and to take into consideration other aspects, not only just economy and ecology. And that is actually the main thing about it. We all pretend that it's mainly an ecology issue. It is an ecology issue, but not only. And it's not only even a business or commercial issue. It is a political and geopolitical issue. And we have no tools, at least in Brussels, to handle that. So we try to figure out a legal way to stop them, say that it contradicts the EU energy package, which is true, and it contradicts the EU energy goals, which is all true. It's a total opposition to the EU energy policy. Yeah, but it doesn't really matter because the main goal of this project is one of the Russian strategic goals to divide Europe, to divide the US-European link, to weaken Ukraine, and to strengthen Russia. Okay, that's the real goal of this project.
Fair enough. Let me be more distinct in what I want to hear from you. Has it created a watershed or a division in between the European states, Nord Stream 1? Has it created ecological disaster or some bad impact? Has it been viable business-wise or hasn't it? How do we evaluate Nord Stream 1? Mikhail, Evgenia.
It's actually evaluation of any project is there is a standard procedure. You have to, if you look at it from the standpoint of the shareholders of Gazprom, for instance, you can simply compare company's cash flow with Nord Stream and without it. And if you go back to 2010, 11, and 12, when the Nord Stream was commissioned, from the standpoint of shareholders, they spend about 34 billion euros, and as a result, they started to sell less gas because the timing coincided with the decline of Russian exports. Nord Stream 1 didn't help to increase natural gas sales. It was not assumed to in the first place because there were no new contracts except one little contract to sell additional 2 billion cubic meters to Denmark. This is it. No new contracts, which indicates it's not commercial.
So it was not so profitable for our Russian neighbors, but could it be serving well our German friends?
Yes, it is, because it's all stream projects like South Stream, Turk Stream, Nord Stream, they are put together such a way so it's, I usually call them too good to be commercial, because foreign partners can step out at any time, any moment, with full recovery of expenses. And they will be paid, in case they stay in the project, paid full tariff, no matter if there is gas or no gas in the pipeline. So it is made very attractive for Western partners, for European partners, and not as good for the shareholders of Gazprom, but they are unable to talk openly about it. Only once one shareholder of Gazprom said openly, asked Putin if Gazprom works for contractors or for us, the shareholders.
So, and if we speak about environmental issues, it's important to understand that first pipeline not comes through nature reserve, not comes through Kurgalsky nature reserve, and I think that Nord Stream 2 worth a project than Nord Stream 1. It's first point. And second point, I like environmentally think that using gas after climate Paris Agreement, it's a really strange decision, because yesterday our world decided to stop to use fossil fuel, but the next day all forgot about our agreement and decided to use a dangerous for climate gas. And I remind for you point from my presentation, now we don't have Nord Stream 2 project pipeline, but now we have horrible problem with coal pollution in Russian cities, in big Russian cities. And it's result of this decision to sell coal to Europe. And I want to share with you one opinion. It's not ecological opinion, it's a political opinion, but I think that situation really changed, because I am citizen of Russia and I can say it. I check Putin regime during 20 years, and I see that its regime degradation very strong. And I think that after annexation of Crimea, after war against Ukraine, it was absolutely impossible to buy Russian gas. And for me, it's strange how it's possible to speak with Gazprom, company under the sanction, about supplying Russian gas. And I don't understand how it's possible for Germany politicians to speak about, we are concerned about human rights in Russia, and after that they sell Russian gas. Yes. It's possible in one moment, and I think that it's absolutely hypocritical position, and I think that we need to organize more events like that. And I'm very pleasant for Mild Helm, for Open Estonia Foundation, for this event, and we need to organize this same event in other countries of European Union.
Thank you, Evgeny. I want to pose you one question. I read in the Bloomberg that the Naftogaz pipeline of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether you have shocking pictures about this pipeline too, but this is they are needing 5.5 billion euro investments, or they will rather express in dollars. Anyhow, is this a very ecological pipeline? Does it have spills? How are the Ukrainians treating it? Are we supporting a very ecological operation there?
I think that it's really stupid decision after climate change agreement to sell money, to spend money for gas pipeline and for oil for this area. I think that more smarter to use our money for green technology, for development of these issues.
Yeah, we have an overall agreement here. Erik Niles.
If I may, this is actually quite an interesting question. How this whole, if Nord Stream 2 will be built, and most probably it will be built, the Germans and the Russians will bully through, and they will build it despite what most of the smaller countries in Europe think and say. And it looks like the lawyers are on the German side and the Russian side in this case. So what will happen to the whole gas situation in Ukraine? The Russians will get the capability to totally cut off Ukraine from the transit. The Germans will be supplied. And the Russians have said that they will not let this happen, that there will be a reverse flow. Because the Germans have been saying that don't worry about Ukraine, we will give them the gas. We will have all we need and more, and the Ukrainians will get it from us. Now, can the Russians really stop it? They are threatening, but I doubt it, because I mean, eventually that means that they would need to cut it off from Germany, and it will be quite difficult. I mean,
Erik Niles, after
that would actually mean, if you think about it, that probably will be good for the Ukrainian situation, because they will reduce corruption in Ukrainian gas business. The Germans will come in. There are also talks about compensating Ukrainians from the German, French, Austrian, British, Dutch side of the loss of business. So a few billions the Germans are ready to throw in, probably. So in an awkward way, that could work like we had a situation with double customs tariffs between Estonia and Russia in the early 90s when the Russians tried to punish us. The result was that the Estonian business just jumped towards the West. So something like that might happen in Ukraine. So maybe it's not all bad, but that doesn't mean that the project itself, of course, is not directed towards that. The idea of the project is to gain more Russian control over Europe.
You know, as I see that you are all of the panelists, you are very much against Nord Stream 2 and of a very clear mindset, I will try to represent the German position now. I had a very marvelous visit due to a conservative think tank to a tiny state of Saarland. And there we were taken into an old Albert Speer steel factory. Albert Speer, of course, being the defense industry minister for Adolf Hitler's administration. This is a very vital steel plant, producing pipes, 12 meters long. 100,000 of those pipes is needed for every pipeline, and there will probably in the future, as you tell, Nord Stream 2 is going to happen, there will be 4 pipelines. And guess how much of the pipelines are made of good German steel? It's majority. So even before Russians are installing their gas into those pipes, the Germans have already done their business. Yes. As
Lenin said, they will sell us the rope with what we will hang them.
Yes. Yes. The second to profit is good Japanese steel factories, and the third only is Russian steel. So can we regard Gerhard Schröder, who is promoting now, of course, Russian gas and oil interest, a traitor of German nation? Or is he doing the right thing for the Germans?
And I remind for you that not only Schröder, but Warning Matthias, he's ahead of the Nord Stream 2 AG company, and he is ex-Stasi, and he is a best friend of Mr. Putin, and he is ahead of Rosneft and Vneshtorbank, and I think that it's really a dangerous project. Why? Because I think that we have deal with project where head of European companies, the Nord Stream 2 AG company, has a relationship with Russian secret services, and I think that it's really dangerous.
Well, it is of course a valid question, and it is this whole project is a very good example of this dilemma between European values, if you wish, transparency and pragmatism. I mean, the German companies will make money. I mean, they're probably the only ones that will make money out of this, because the Russians obviously don't make money because they do not have more gas, and they have a lot of expenses, as we heard, to build this thing.
So having enormous reserves, they still lack gas. Is this what you say?
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they do not need a new pipeline to export their gas. They already have the capability. Why do they need it? They need it for some other reasons.
Currently, Russia can, looking at the capacity, it's higher than the total overall European Union's need in imported gas. So Russia alone can ship all gas Europe needs.
Well, Erik Milles, of course, is right that they need the gas, the business, for other reasons. We have to keep in mind the case of Mr. Firtash, who was arrested in Austria and then released on bail of 155 million euros. He was being enabled to make business with the support of Gazprom Bank, which provided an enormous credit line of 11 billion euros. And then he was enabled to sell the gas to Ukraine with a very sufficient markup. But Russia can bribe politicians or businessmen or so-called businessmen, because you wouldn't call really the speculation a business, without having a pipeline, can't they?
I think of course. I mean, that's one of the more important export items of the Russian Federation currently is corruption, as we know, and corrupt money. So of course they can, but they gain, at least in their view, and sometimes the Kremlin projects like that are in a way illusionary. I mean, because it is a little bit of this 20th century geopolitical rigid thinking that a pipeline will give you some kind of leverage. And they probably evaluate it higher than it really matters. But that doesn't change that is the way they think, and that is the way they plan.
Okay,
it's not about business as much as it is about the spheres of influence, the strategic leverage, the Russian geostrategic, strength over the European Union, and just the pure fun that they can play the European countries against each other.
Okay.
Yeah, I participated in the pipeline construction plans, developing pipeline construction plans for the old management of Gazprom before Putin and Miller. And I remember in early shortly after 2000, we developed a new plan. The head of the strategic planning department of Gazprom and we together developed a plan that had total pipeline demands like 8 to 10 times lower than now. Because we approached it and considered the plan from the efficiency standpoint to achieve the maximum result with minimum spendings. When the new team came with Alex and Miller on top, they changed the approach immediately 180 degrees and started to plan from the standpoint of maximization of expenses. And I can find only one explanation that Putin and Miller wanted to justify the pipeline construction business of Putin's friends. Because it's a big, no business in Europe or in Ukraine can bring like 70 billion euros as the overall cost of Russian section of South Stream. Abandoned project but the Russian sections are already built.
You're talking about large quantities of money. Mikhail, you were estimating the overall construction, both the Russian side and the Baltic Sea naval side of Nord Stream 2 at 40 billion euros, which is a little bit surprising because...
It's not estimations, official numbers of Gazprom. You can find them at the website of Gazprom.
Yes, I don't doubt that. I'm just putting it into perspective that the market cap, the overall the overall price of Gazprom is how much? It's around 60.
Just
so we are talking about the investment of 40 of a company who is worth 60. Does it make sense?
It doesn't, because that's about the project being commercial. It's not. Because, and most importantly, the project is not about increasing sales. It's about selling same volumes of gas through a different export route. So basically, the shareholders spend 40 billion and get nothing. And it cannot be a 40 billion euros investment cannot be more profitable than existing pipeline system.
So, Mikhail Korchemkin, you've been meeting big leaders of prominent oil and gas companies around the world, and particularly in Europe. How would you estimate ethically the big urge of Ruhrgas and BASF, the Badische Analin und Sodafabrik?
Ruhrgas doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, it's AON, of course,
right,
but then the Italians, the French, also the Italian bank Intesa, who last week expressed their intention to extend their credit if it's enabled by the European sanctions. Why would those people work with the company of Rothenberg, Timcek and Putin, which some call not a company but just a political organization?
They are pragmatic. The companies are doing the best for their shareholders. And every commitment to Gazprom, every memorandum of understanding, every letter of intents means a price discount or some other benefits from Gazprom or from Russia and other deals. So they are doing good for their shareholders, and which they have to do. But simultaneously, if you notice, they also get rid of the shares of Gazprom. Just like 15 years ago, many European companies had packages like Ruhrgas, for instance. They owned at some point nearly 5% of Gazprom.
And they disinvested.
They disinvested. They see that Gazprom itself, looking at these projects, they can see it's not good to keep money in Gazprom, and that's true. If you look at the Moscow Stock Exchange Index, which is composed out of 50 best companies, the worst of them is Gazprom. It's the only company that didn't get out of the crisis of 2008. All companies have shares above the level of 2008, except Gazprom. Gazprom is still hanging at the bottom.
If they now get the order to build Nord Stream 2, the share probably will be blossoming.
Yes, it goes down.
Okay, vice versa.
It means negative cash flow for a number of years ahead.
Yevgenia, please.
And I want to add one important point. You need to understand that we analyze Russian budget, and we understand that Putin regime has a double budget, and it's part. It's a huge money, and it's part organized from gas money and oil money, from fossil fuel money, and normal countries don't have this double budget. But Putin's regime has it. And Putin's regime spends this money for different horrible things. And it's really very important to understand that now the price of gas for Russian people increasing.
Yes.
In 13%.
As I told us.
But for Europe, price for gas decreasing. Why? Because for Putin, it's really very important to keep this double budget, because it's his power, it's his possibility to impact to Europe, to America, to buy foreign politicians, to impact to media, and to make horrible things, because goals of Putin, it's not create normal life in Russia. He was to make Russia in Europe And it's a problem. And I think that main problem of the Nord Stream 2 project is that its project prolong life of Putin's regime for 20 years.
Yes, if the Chinese are very reluctant to buy Putin's gas, then Europeans are very eager to buy Putin's gas. Now, before asking my last question and giving the possibility of asking questions to our audience, I would like to show one very prominent first list of the recent report about the activities of Putin's chef, Yevgeny Prigozhin. He now has been caught red-handed in manipulating the social networks, the Facebook, the Twitter and the Instagram, in order to raise suspicions against US liquefied gas production and in order to sabotage the domestic energy markets exploiting social media. This is the recent report to the United States House of Representatives. And must be a very active guy, this chef of Putin. All his military activities with the Wagners, and also distorting social media in the United States. But now, my question is that in between 2011, when the first pipe of Nord Stream 1 was being installed, and now there's been 7 years, has Europe been prepared for the situation? Do we have our laws, our LNG terminals in place?
Yes, there's a lot of spare capacity. The current utilization factor of European LNG terminals is below 30%. So if necessary, Europe can, and if the price is right, Europe can import a lot of gas. In late June, early July this year, a new pipeline from Azerbaijan will be commissioned. TANAP will start deliveries to Turkey first, and then shortly after that it will be extended to Greece and the whole European Union.
So there's interconnectivity now, there's a possibility of unbundling. Yes. Is there even legal option to demand access to a pipeline?
The big problem is that all politicians, they address this problem from using the annual numbers. And actually, here's my old colleague who worked on Gazprom projects back like in 40 years ago. And we always were addressing that it should be addressed on daily basis, because you don't need gas like 10 billion a year. You need that amount of gas in winter and this in summer. Same as, for instance, if you assume you are using like 24 liters of water a day and use like 12 liters in the morning and another 12 in the evening. But the pipe, you have just tiny pipe that sends 1 liter an hour. Then you have to care about the storage of this water. Same as about gas. But in case of gas, it's very hard to store. So they usually use a large diameter pipe. But utilization factor is different in summer and winter. And a project like Nord Stream that assumes full load through the year is of no use, especially as a backup fuel for...
It can work as a storage summertime.
No, it cannot, because it should be sending every day after day same volume, and there is no storage in Europe. The storage capacity is going down, first of all in Britain, and for business purposes there were some closures of underground storage facilities in Germany too.
On the legal side, maybe, of course the European Union is not ready. European Union is never ready legally and is running behind events, but that's inevitable to some extent. But it has, particularly Nord Stream 2 now has triggered quite a few processes in the EU which by themselves are good. First, the Council of the European Union has actually recognized that this is a project that matters to the European Union. It's not the bilateral issue between Germany and Russia. They have asked for a mandate to negotiate with the Russians from the member states. And that has started a legal dispute. And they have also presented a set of amendments to the EU gas directive, which would then now cover also pipelines from outside the European Union. Right now, the EU law actually doesn't cover this pipeline.
It's efficient only on terrain.
So EU probably fails eventually to actually handle this problem, but it's getting ready for the problems like that in the future, and that by itself is good. That will be a problem with British pipelines. When Britain leaves, what will happen legally to the pipelines that connect Britain with continental Europe, etc.
A big difference between the first Nord Stream and the second one. The first became on the list, got into the list of 10 trans-European network projects before the construction, and the second one is far from that. Because it was considered as an important project before the construction. It was conceived in the period of growing gas demand, and then the forecast of gas and fossil fuel in general consumption in Europe were different from today's.
It seems to me that Europe is yet not sure whether its third energy package is efficient only on terrain or also on naval territories.
Well, the lawyers of the EU have now said that outside the European Union territory, under waters, they can't. The European law is not. They can't touch those.
Although those are only lawyers of European Council, not the court, really.
Not the court yet, but
Nord Stream 2 is useless without the German link, EUGAL, the pipeline that would run parallel to Opal, pipeline that delivers gas from the Baltic Sea to the border of Czech Republic. And they are plan to build the same, called EUGAL, E-U-G-A-L, run parallel to Opal. And this is a matter of, this construction requires approval of Brussels, because it's internal land pipeline that runs, say, from the sea to internal border of the EU.
Talking about the Opal, this is the access from Germany to Czech land. Isn't it so that there are some problems still with the full capacity? The Czechs are not allowing it to operate to full capacity because there was a certain amount, to my mind, 3 billion cubic meters, which the Czech were in a position of buying from Gazprom, but they were not given this amount and things like that. It's not. Some analysts claim that to answer my question when I made this call yesterday about whether or not the Nord Stream 1 is operating with full capacity. And they told that it is. It's a cold winter, except this Opal. But okay, those are details. I'm now willing to take questions to the panel. Are we extending the mic? Okay. Who is the first to ask? Ambassadors, professors, gentlemen, ex-ministers, ex-prime ministers? Please.
So maybe the first one. I am Vasily Kovenko from the Ukrainian embassy in Tallinn, in Estonia. I am first secretary at the embassy, and for the time being, I am chargé d'affaires ad interim, because our ambassador has left and no new ambassador has come yet. First of all, I don't have any questions because this discussion and presentation made the possibility for me to learn much more about this Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. And most probably that all of you are aware that Ukraine was against the building of the Nord Stream 1, and now we are very strictly against building the Nord Stream 2. And you have explained a lot of reasons for that, why we are against. But no one of you mentioned that these days Ukraine is facing another problem with the Russian Gazprom, which on the 1st of March took a decision to cut supplies of gas to the transit pipeline, which delivers gas to Europe, at least by twice. This decision was made because Russia and the Russian Gazprom are not satisfied with the decision by the Stockholm Arbitrary Court, which decided that the Russian Gazprom should pay to the Ukrainian Naftogaz 2.5 billion of if I'm not mistaken. That decision was because there was a long dispute in between the Russian Gazprom and Ukrainian Naftogaz, since Ukraine decided to cut buying the Russian gas 2 or 3 years ago. I don't remember exactly. This decision, on the 1st of March, to put much less gas to the transit pipeline, put under risk and threat the energy security of Europe. And when the government of Ukraine and the Ukrainian president understood that there was a decision taken to buy insufficient portion of gas from the 3 European countries like Poland, Slovak and Hungary, to fill the transit pipeline and to supply the gas to Europe. And also the Ukrainian president appealed to the Ukrainian people to cut, at least in the night, consumption of gas so that we could fill the pipeline which supplies the gas to Europe. So one thing that I want just to stress is that Russia and the Russian Gazprom are not reliable partner. We should not trust them, and they use every possibility just to press, to put the political pressure on Europe and to play their role in Europe and to gain their interest in Europe. I'm very much thankful to Evgenia that she explained also the situation with the military aggression in Ukraine, and you know that it's lasting and we don't see any end to that conflict. I also very much grateful to Eric for his intervention with the situation in Ukraine, and I know that you are Ukrainian rapporteur in the yes, a parliamentary assembly of the OSCE, and thank you for your activities there. And also to Mr. Evgeny, who also explained all the aspects and negative feedbacks from building Nord Stream 2. Thank you all.
Thank you. The panel got a lot of compliments now.
Thank you.
As a remark, I would like to add that with those last moves of President Trump with his tariffs, so the number of reliable partners really seems to diminish with every day. Next question, please. Who is next? Mr. Aladaro, please.
Thank you. I am former member of Parliament. And I want to remind to everyone that first flow of Russian, or let's say Soviet, gas and oil went to the Europe in June 1968. And please remind, it was time of the spring, break spring, Praskaya Vesna. And then even nothing was published, because it was my duty also to follow the main newspapers of this time. And the first notice about it was published only in 1973, when this policy of distension reached two German states, when started negotiation between two German states, and there were publications about it in Soviet press. And it means that the censorship in Western Germany started in summer 1968. And as you know, it is continuing until today. So much about it. I want to say that Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 are only continuation of old policy between Germany.
Do you have a question to the panelists?
Yes. And to my mind, it is impossible to solve this problem only with current participators. And my question is to Mr. Korchomkin, because you are working in United States. And during this time, had there been advices invite to take part in solution of the East European problems, also representatives of China? And I will remind that immediately after the eastern part of the European Union was formed, China started summits separately with the leaders of the East Europe. There was initiative by China to build up ports in Ukraine, even during the time of Yanukovych, and it is clear that port, it is also a liquid gas, and so on. So once more.
The question about the impact of China. Okay.
Yeah, by invitation of China, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
China is used as a tool to, whenever the Kremlin wants to scare Europe that they would change gas flow, West Siberian gas flow from Europe to China. Gazprom and Putin express or address this issue from time to time. Every time there is like opposition to a new pipeline project of Russia to Europe. Concerning the LNG terminal in Ukraine, it was more about the LNG tanker passage through Bosporus Straits, through Turkish Straits in general, which is a matter of Turkish security rather than Ukraine's. Yeah, in 68, 68 aastal ma käisin Tipis veel.
I was 7-year-old and Erik Niles was not born yet. Right?
Yeah. I do remember this. Then I learned the history of pipeline construction a bit later, but not during my university years. The pipeline, specifically in this period of time, was running through Czechoslovakia then, and it was extended to Vienna first. And Austria was the first one to receive, first of the Western Europe to receive gas from West Siberia. A bit later on, it was diverted also to Germany.
Right.
Italy,
with all respect to the seniors, let's have another question from this side.
Maybe I respond really quick to the same comment that only the current participants can't solve the problem. There are still possibilities, and I would look very carefully what Denmark and Sweden are doing right now, because the German argument has been that it's a bilateral issue, and the European Union shouldn't interfere and can't legally. Now the Council of Europe has its European Union Council has its own fight, and they are trying to get into the play, but it's not final. But Denmark has I'm not sure if they already passed, but they are about to pass a law that says that they can deny that kind of pipeline activity in their economic waters for security reasons. Right now they can deny it only for ecological reasons. But if the Denmark will block it and then say to the Germans, well, it's a national decision, the European Union is not involved, then too bad. Sweden is against it as well. Unlike with Nord Stream 1, Sweden and Denmark were happy. Finns will probably comply with everything as usual, but Denmark and Sweden can still change this project quite significantly.
But in general, the market is, in the best case, it's stagnating. In general, it's declining because it's renewables, wind power and solar is penetrating fast. And right now, the EU has more than enough capacity running from Russia. Its utilization factor is below 80% definitely, even in winter time. With the record flows of Gazprom of recent 6-7 days can be beaten by 15-20% easily with the full utilization of Ukrainian capacity.
Okay, next questions, please. That was a question there. Lady, please.
Hi, my name is Perit Kuzik and I'm from the Estonian Foreign Policy Institute at ICDS. So my question is that what kind of impact has the Nord Stream 2 made on Estonia, Germany? bilateral relations? And also, what does the US think about the Nord Stream 2? Thank you.
US promotes competition. That's why US supports, for instance, the alternative project TANAP, Trans-Anatolian Pipeline, that will deliver gas from Azerbaijan to Europe, and opposes the Nord Stream, because competition is for America is like Lenin for the Soviet Union, and has always been fair competition. Germany will get more cash from transit business if Nord Stream 2 is introduced, but they would need to behave, to be very careful, not only the German government, but German companies, even regional, local judges. For instance, if a local judge would arrest or decides to arrest property to pay out, for instance, UKOS debts to UKOS shareholders, that is a good reason to turn off the flow, and then not only Germany would suffer, but the whole Union, because then all gas would run through Germany.
There was one hand before Professor
Maybe about
Ray. There was one hand before.
A quick response about the Estonian-German relations. I do not think that the Estonian-German relations have been damaged in any way. Estonia also has been quite cautious lately about this issue, but usually Merkel is using this line, and not just with us, but with the Polish. Recently they had a meeting with the Polish Prime Minister. And basically the German political line is, or official line is, that this is it's a business project, and we do not really want to talk about it. And that just pushes so the German government really pushes it aside, while the other countries in Europe are trying to sort of bring it into the political debate. So that's the game they are playing.
Evgenia, any remarks here? No? Okay, we will take the gentleman there and then Professor Reik. I remind Mr. Reik that we need questions, not speeches, but here, you are the first.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Jawad Kapoor, lecturer at Tallinn University of Technology in Energy Security course. If I may, I have two questions. The second one is very short, of course. If we want to be realistic enough, is there a real alternative for some new project like Nord Stream? Because you emphasized on TANAP, but I think with all due respect, TANAP will finally be something like 20-30 billion cubic meter, because Trans-Caspian is not so promising, I would say, and it is not enough to see it as something like alternative for Nord Stream. Also, there are still some political situation problem with Iran, so Iran cannot be the alternative. And United States, again, I think even United States cannot be something so reliable, because if we remind even about the embargo of oil exporting in 70s after the oil shock, then United States just cut the exporting the oil. So maybe even in some situation again about the gas, in case of having import of LNG from United States, then again that happened, and European country cannot have something instead of Russia. And second one, very short, you mentioned, Eric, about something that Denmark maybe do about the Nord Stream. Is it also promising to see any action from Sweden as well, do you think? Especially if I'm not mistaken, Sweden started to militarize again the Gotland island last year. So maybe since the Nord Stream wanted to pass next to the Gotland, that can be another option for European Union to convince Sweden to take some action as well. Do you think is it something suitable for stalling or making reaction against Nord Stream? Thank you so much.
Well, the first question is clearly not for me, but I will answer real quick the second one because it's really short. I'm not aware of any Swedish legal initiatives at this point, but Swedish government is publicly against Nord Stream 2. They do not like it for the same reasons that Denmark does it, and all the sort of Northern European smaller member states do not like it. So possible, yes.
Yes, there is a difference between Swedes and Danish approaches to Nord Stream, because first Nord Stream runs through the Danish territory. The only transit country, in fact, is Denmark. Others are economic zones of the other countries like Finland, Sweden. And the different rules are applied to territorial waters and economic zones. And I think they already approved that law that gives Denmark power to cancel projects. Yeah. But Gazprom is also ready to change the route so they would move from territorial waters to the economic zone, and then that would be solved. As to TANAP, TANAP is not competing with Nord Stream because it's an absolutely new project. It has signed contracts for the deliveries of new gas. As to Turkmen supplies, there was a major event in the Caspian Sea. All parties agreed to divide the bottom of the sea just like a couple of months ago. And now this problem is solved, which was a major obstacle to the Trans-Caspian pipeline consumption. Now, I think that was Iran applied some pressure on Russia and joined the three countries of Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan. And so they agreed on dividing the bottom of the Caspian Sea. So now there are no obstacles, and there is a visible movement in the process of building Trans-Caspian. At least they have regular meetings, and commissions are discussing it. Nord Stream and what was the beginning of the...
But is there any alternative? But there was also a hint...
There is no, yes, alternative is Ukraine. Ukraine can ship much more gas than it does now, without any problem. The system is not at all. The maintenance has been done through the years, and if you look at the failure statistics, compare Ukrainian and Russian, they are the same. It's the system is as reliable as the Russian. Natural business approach is to, if there is less gas is shipped, lower pressure is needed, so you spend less money on compressor maintenance, which Ukraine does. It wouldn't make any sense to invest more money than they need to keep like double capacity and using just 50% of it. So they do it in accordance with the demand.
If there, as there was also a hint, okay.
Little add, and I want to answer for your first question. And I think that if you want something, you will find 1,000 of possibilities. And a question of development of green energy, it's only a question of political will. Only. And you can see for experience of Norwegian, and you can see that when people really want something, they done it. And I think that it's really not so good idea to pay for man who a couple of days ago threat all world by nuclear weapon. And I think it's not so smart to pay for this person.
As there was also a hint on the supplies of the United States. Let me ask you this question, Mr. Korchemkin. How close is U.S. help? How compatible is the price with which the largest LNG exporter, the Cheniere of Texas, will be able to sell liquefied gas at the point in some ports of Europe? Can it really be cheaper than a natural gas coming from the pipe?
It depends. The prices, there are long-term contract sales and mid-term, short-term, and spot sales. And situation is flexible. Like in the summertime, let's take an example of the Baltic states. We here have a huge storage facility in Inčukalns in Latvia and LNG terminal in Lithuania. So if in summertime the price is good, it's quite possible to buy gas in June or July, inject it into storage facility and use it in winter when the price is up. Long-term prices are defined by different formulas. Gazprom is switching from oil indexation to gas indexation to like spot price in different markets. There were cases when, for instance, LNG from Qatar was 3 times cheaper than Russian gas in Europe. But this was like about 7-8 years ago. Since then, the prices got closer, the spot market price in Europe and long-term contract price. But situation is flexible, especially at the spot. As you saw, the spike of the spot market price just a few days ago.
Everybody will be happy to sell at this price.
Another good option is to buy, to sign, to make a deal in advance when before the construction of LNG terminal, when a company like Cheniere or any other American is raising money for LNG plant, then they sign a better contract with but then you have to pay something in advance or just to make a strict deal, not pay in advance, because they then can borrow money using this contract.
So an attractive price for LNG is at reach. It's doable.
Yes, absolutely. It's
all right.
Then if you consider Europe as a whole, gas delivered to Portugal or Spain, it's been delivered from the United States on many occasions, is all right. It competes with Algerian gas, which is priced on oil mostly. And in general, it's the same, like EU consumption. It,
very assuring.
Adds to the European basket.
Okay, Professor Ray.
Thank you. First of all, I understand that my comments are not good for this audience in this house, but I'm surprised why you don't like my comments.
Professor, your lectures are okay, but here's the time for questions.
Because we are more or less in the same boat now. But I have very concrete questions to both of speakers. For Mikhail, I have a question about the prices. You started just to talk about who is controlling the prices for gas right now in the world, because I understood that Americans, they started to produce more gas, and that's why the prices are lower, and for how long time this situation will last. Because the Gazprom situation very much depends on that. All other gas companies, they have also very low valuation in the stock market right now. Who control and how this mechanism works? Because this future of Russia and future of Europe very much depends on that. Right. On that. And for Evgenia, a question: when Russians they start to consume more gas, when they say that stop selling gas to Europe because we need this gas to develop their own economy. And this picture was very emotional, selling gas when Russians, they will, because environmental issues, they are secondary for Putin. First is the people, they demand gas. When this happens, and a question about legal issues. When Europe can act jointly in this legal dispute over the Baltic Sea second pipeline, I think that this is lawyers should find a way how to stop making or building this second pipeline. Thank you.
Fair enough. 3 questions,
right.
3 persons.
The prices are not controlled by anybody. Long-term contract prices are defined bilaterally by seller and buyer. Usually they set up a formula, so the price may depend on the price of a basket of oil products or price of natural gas at specific hubs or spot markets, sometimes at the price of electricity, on the price of coal. Air temperature may also be included into the formula, and some other things. And the parties usually define the period after which the formula can be renegotiated. It's not like established once and for good. It's every year, one year, 2 or 3 years of operations. Short-term contracts are very often linked to the spot market prices, and spot market is defined by the buyers and sellers. It can be manipulated, I think, by like we're talking about gas. OPEC is oil is not competing with gas anymore because even the heavy fuel oil, mazout, is of no use for power generation anymore. Gazprom, for instance, can, with statement like the other day, threatening to cut the transit flow through Ukraine. This way they manipulate the spot market in Europe. It reflects in slightly higher price, in this case not slightly, but significantly higher price of gas in the markets. US sells strictly on spot market linked prices. Either long-term, it's a formula that includes the price of gas in different areas. Yeah, then there are prices in Asia, and currently some people see a glut in the LNG market, but very recently China introduced a plan to move from coal to gas, and this in planned economy it works fine. There is even a shortage of gas, and all LNG goes to China and sold at high price. So basically nothing is left for Europe. So China is a big player that can change, affect the price very significantly. But we have, there are many more new LNG plants coming on stream within the next 2-3 years. Several projects in the United States. Just a week ago, the first LNG was shipped from a new LNG plant in Maryland, United States, on the Atlantic coast, which is closer to Europe. More projects in America, several projects in Australia, some scattered projects in Africa. I think Egypt is coming back to gas liquefaction because they started to receive gas from Mediterranean, offshore Mediterranean fields, and Egypt just at some point was exporter, then became an importer of gas, and now is turning again to exporter. So the natural gas future is in general bright, and there is no reason to assume the price would go up. It most likely it will fluctuate around the current levels.
Mikael, how bright can the future of a non-recoverable fuel be? When are we going to see the peak gas?
I'm an old person, relatively old, and I address it from my life expectancy maybe. But all all fossil fuels future is bad in general, because most recent forecast assume that even gas would start, gas consumption in the world would peak in about 2040, 2050. But in my view, personal view, the progress of renewables will be faster than assumed now. And every year, if you look back 5 years back, every new forecast about wind power and solar panels is higher than the previous. And in general, it's a big difference. And the rate of introduction of renewables is much faster, much higher than assumed just like a couple of years ago.
Okay, Yevgenia, when is there going to be an uprising against Gazprom Nash Dom?
Thank you a lot for your question, and I understand you correctly that are you Estonian?
Yes,
very nice.
Indeed.
And it means that you know why people in Russia could not defend of gas from Putin's regime, because I remind for you your youth when you live in occupied country and when you live under the KGB system, under the pressure of propaganda machine, and you understand, I think, very good what it means to live under the KGB pressure when after your activity you can be arrested, when you each day needed to see propaganda from TV. And I want to say for you that now we have inspiring trend in Russia, because situation with increasing activity, civil society activity is not so bad in Russia, and we have a very inspiring trend of increasing civil society activity in Russia. And I remember that a couple of years ago was really war against people in one small village and authorities, because people wanted to make gas in their village, and authorities needed to use OMON. It's a military guys who beaten people, who beaten children, and who arrested people for demand of gas. And I think that Russian people who really demand something from Putin's regime is really hero, because now in Russia it's possible to come to prison after simply like in not in Facebook, in Vkontakte, in internet. And after only post of some information in your internet, and it's really horrible situation. And I think that I check situation with Putin's regime, and I see that its regime became more stronger and stronger, and now unfortunately we don't have normal independent media, and unfortunately people don't have a chance to get normal information only from internet. But unfortunately Roskomnadzor sometimes to forbidden normal independent media in internet, and now we have a real struggle against Putin's regime, but unfortunately we don't have any support.
But even businessmen and oligarchs, they cannot have, because they need to develop the economy.
Yes, and you need to understand that we don't have normal oligarch, we have only Putin's friends. It's another type of people, and unfortunately 100 years ago power in my country was seized by terrorist group. They call themselves the Red Terror Group, and I remind for you who was head of Soviet Union. It was mafiosi. Stalin was mafiosi, and I think that now we have really terrorists, and I think that now we have a tragedy in Russia, because KGB is a terrorist organization, and this organization have power in my motherland and threat people in my country.
Yeah, again, as it already happened 100 years ago, it's happening again that the Russian terrorists had their good friends in Germany, didn't they?
Yes,
under Kaiser Wilhelm.
And it's really strange.
So when we will become to speak with one EU voice, Erik Niiles? That's what the question from Mr. Rai.
Well, that is, in a way, again, it is the everlasting EU dilemma. And the EU is not a complete project. It's neither a state, a country, and it's nor anymore a bundle of independent countries. It's something in between. And the debate really is right now among the lawyers as well, is it an EU matter or is it a national matter? And, you know, in many cases, Estonia likes also that something is a national matter. And then when it's useful, then we like it to be an EU matter. In this regard, it would be good for us if it's an EU matter. But obviously, we have to participate in this debate. Right now, what happened was the Council of Europe, which is already a big step forward, wanted or still wants to extend the internal energy market law upon this pipeline.
Foreign trade is EU matter. This is foreign trade.
Right now, the official legal opinion of the EU is that the Commission's proposal lacks any reasoning on the regulatory power of the Union over offshore pipelines. The Union doesn't have jurisdiction to apply energy law, which is unrelated to the economic exploitation of the economic zone, to pipelines crossing the economic zones of member states. And it contradicts the UN Convention on the Law of Seas. But that's why I think at this point, you have as many opinions as lawyers. At this point, I think it's probably more fruitful to bring it to a political level, because the majority of the member states probably oppose this. And end of the day, the Council has the legislative power as well. The European Parliament is opposed to this project anyway. So actually the powers are there. It's a matter of political will to outvote the Germans and the French. Do we want to do that? Maybe.
Okay. Thank you.
Not only foreign trade, it is also competition.
Okay. That's clear enough. We are now, before taking the last questions, we are now making a physical exercise. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask the cameramen to turn yourselves to the audience, and there's the first question. Who is against the idea of building Nord Stream 2? Raise your hands, please. Against Nord Stream 2. Okay, the camera got it. And now there's another question. Who is supporting Erik Niiles in his vision that it is going to be built? Who thinks that it's positively going to be built, Nord Stream 2? Your hands, please. Is it less than half? Right, we'll count from the video. Thank you so much. Let's take two last questions. Okay.
Olaf Din from Estonian Greens. And we have been talking a lot of political things here, but gas is also a raw material for chemical industry. And we know that there are very big chemical corporations in Germany and also Gazprom. So do states, or can they even do something if we have such powerful multinational corporations made a decision already to build this kind of pipeline?
Did I understand the question?
No.
I missed the point. What is the question again?
We have big corporations who decide. Maybe it's not even decided anymore on state levels. We have big multinational corporations who make the decisions.
Well, the corporations are deciding, the state is legislating. What's the point?
Yes, but they have so powerful influence in their countries that it is not anymore, that they are stronger than the states already.
So you mean they affect the permission process?
They affect the decision that they do whatever they want to do.
Are we talking about the decision or permission?
No, if they have decided between themselves that they want this line to be built.
So that was not a question, it was a declaration. They have too much power. Everybody agrees, especially Gazprom seems to have very much power. But let's have another question.
The UGAL project is a concern of Brussels, of the whole union. It's not just Nord Stream, because it runs through Germany and across the border of Germany and Czech Republic. So this should be approved by the whole Union.
Anneli, please, the last question.
Yes, Anneli Rõigas, journalist. I wrote many stories about Nord Stream first plans and struggle at Agence France Presse over 10 years, and I want just to give a fair note that there were 2 countries in Europe, in all EU, who had real legal right to step out against this Gazprom and Putin ambitions, and those 2 countries who did nothing were Estonia and Finland. Let's remind it, because according to international law, we had a right to close the gulf between Tallinn and Helsinki because it's so narrow. Nothing was done, so let's remember this. And the other remark is, I didn't like how Hans said a remark about Estonian Academy of Sciences. It kind of sounded ironic that they said that it can lead to some kind of, I don't know, atomic whatever. The problem was that there were chemical weapons in Baltic Sea. We don't know where they are exactly. And when Mr. Lippmaa, my friend, was leading this struggle, all those environmental arguments, they were kind of excuse, because the main reason was Ukraine. We were very, very much scared that when instead of Druzhba, that the Druzhba number 2, that could have been 2-3 times at least cheaper. The Nord Stream is going to be built. It will take off any responsibility from Putin to have good relationship with Ukraine. What has happened, we have all seen.
Thank you for those remarks.
No, actually, that's not remarks. I studied these questions about the border. It's very interesting. There is a document in the United Nations database that shows that in '93, Finland and Estonia decided to move the border line from the center line between the countries like 3 miles apart and to create a corridor of neutral territory, neutral territorial waters. Right, but initially there was no such thing because there was a USSR and Finland, no need to do that. And this is actually surprised me because Estonia is not a big country. Why would Estonia lose a portion of it, several square miles or square kilometers, by moving its border inside? Second, both countries lose money for navigational services, because otherwise there was a payment for crossing the narrow portion of the sea basically between Tallinn and Helsinki. So this thing, and who did that? Who decided to move the border?
It happened in October of 1992. Initiated 92, committed 93 by Lennart Meri, wasn't it?
But Meri was unable to do that because it should be done by Riga.
There was a big confusion who is in a position of taking those decisions.
It's a constitutional. You're unable to move the border easily.
Mm-hmm. Any comments, Erik Niles? Well, if not, I'm
in another format.
Yes, we are now under time pressure. Distinguished guests, I thank you very much for the sophisticated discussion. Thank you for Open Estonia Fund. Thank you everybody attending.